Welcome to a bonus episode. During this episode, you get a rare opportunity to hear the conversation that took place between Sandy, Rob, and Elle after the recording of episode 7. In this conversation, they remember back to when Rob and Elle met for the first time, discussed the groundbreaking work that they currently are working on, and emphasize the importance of seeing the human when you look at the justice system. We are so glad you've joined us. Lakeside is pleased to sponsor this exciting broadcast featuring Dr. Sandra Bloom and Sarah Yanesi on Voice America.
Rob, this one was for you. What changes have been implemented since the report, and what's most important to address now?
Well, that's, obviously a big question. Let me just underline the fact that the criminal justice system is a reflection of our society. And I still say criminal justice system because I've been part of it for 40-something years. And I think I went into it, and so many people went into it thinking that they were trying to do the right thing. I certainly felt that way. I realize we may not have done that, but I think that certainly our goal is to do justice. And I think that you shouldn't take justice out of anything if that is really your pure motive for moving forward. But the bottom line is that if we have a dysfunctional series of systems, whether family systems, our communities are traumatized, our human services, health system, all these other systems are screwed up, the criminal justice system is just going to reflect what these other systems are. I think, unfortunately, and I do think that the criminal justice system I'm not saying it shouldn't get a bad rap, but the problem is that it is ultimately the dumping ground for all the problems that people don't want to deal with. So you've got our prisons are our largest mental health providers,
Right.
in the country.
Right.
And yet, even in our prisons, people can't get mental health treatment. And so it's ridiculous. And yet people then blame the criminal justice system for these problems when it is a larger societal problem that says we don't really care about these people.
Right.
So the bottom line is, it's true that people within the criminal justice system need to be trauma informed, but our politicians need to be trauma informed. People need to understand the enormity of the shift that has to take place, this paradigm shift that you both talk about so much, in terms of we need to start really seeing people as human beings who have potential. They have been hurt. Tomorrow, I oversee something called the Pennsylvania Reentry Council. And tomorrow we're having our quarterly meeting, and I'm going to be on with this woman who has spent maybe a year and a half in prison. But when you hear her story and the fact that her parents were both drug addicted themselves, she lived in the Kensington area of Philadelphia. She suffered so much. She now has PTSD. She has children. I don't know how she does it. I mean, with whatever strengths I have, I couldn't do it. And yet she is doing it. And our society gives her marginal help at best. So the bottom line is we have to look at this as an entire system, entire country, society problem. But then to go to your specific question, there are lots of efforts going on right now to change the way that we do things, for example, in the court system. I was just down in Miami, and they're trying to focus on the fact that such a high percentage of people going into our juvenile justice facilities and our prisons suffer from mental illness. And so how do we keep those people out and provide them the treatment they need without putting them in jail or juvenile detention? So that's a huge effort that's going on, not just in Florida, but in southern Florida, I should say, but also in Pennsylvania. We are the Administrative Office of Pennsylvania Courts in Pennsylvania is focused on behavioral health. They have an executive committee, which I'm on. The County Commissioners Association has a behavioral health commission. The governor's office has started one. The point is that people are really starting to focus on this for the first time. And so there are shifting of resources for prevention. The governor has provided a lot of funding for school-based mental health. And all of this is a huge step forward. I realize this isn't going to so much what's happening in the juvenile justice system, but it's a beginning. We have started, the Attorney General's office started this program called the Law Enforcement Training Initiative and LETI, which is an effort to open up our police departments to essentially be aware and understand the impact of addiction. So when people come to the police department, they can then be transferred to a addiction or a mental health / substance abuse facility with no questions asked. So in other words, police are learning in a different way that substance abuse is related to mental health issues and that they need to get treatment and that they're going to assist in that process. We have a program called Handle with Care, where this has been implemented in lots of places across Pennsylvania. But the bottom line here is that it not allows police departments and in school districts come together. So when a child has been exposed to a traumatic event, for example, a father being arrested, domestic violence, whatever it is in the home, and police or a first responder is called, the school is notified, not of the specifics of the incident, but the fact that the child has been impacted by some kind of traumatic event. And so essentially the school is notified to handle the child with care. That's all they know. And so when the child goes to the school an hour after seeing their mom beaten to the pulp by the dad, I'm just an example, the police or the first responders will call it the school, notify the school so that child, if that child's acting out or having a hard time, they know to handle that child differently with extra care. So there are a number of programs that are going on around the state, and these are just starters. But I'll turn it back to you.
Okay, so that's what we wanted to hear about. And what I want to know now is you two are both some of the most powerful advocates that I know around trying to get this system to change. And so can you tell our listeners a little bit about your collaboration with each other and how your work together is driving change?
Al?
Rob,
Well, let me just say it began 14 years ago, and I'm just
it's
going
been
to
that long.
summarize
Yeah.
it by saying that Elle was then on parole. I was then in the U.S. Attorney's Office, and we collaborated on a school anti-violence program. But the bottom line is that Elle confided in me that about his past, including his time and spending 8 years in Graterford prison, and his desire to create a film. I learned that he was a filmmaker. And so we collaborated in the sense that he did all the work and I got some money, not that much, from the Department of Justice to support his filmmaking. And he created a film called Pull of Gravity. And I'd love to tell you detail about that, especially Mobile, Alabama. But the bottom line is it's a great film that anyone can see. I think you can Google.
I use it in my classes.
Yeah. And Elle is one of the protagonists. He's one of the three main people that are focused on. And I do make a cameo appearance. I might admit.
All right, I want to hear Elle's end of the story.
But the bottom line is we've shown it all over the
Yeah.
country. It's an hour-and-a-half film. It is a gripping and very sad story about how challenging, how difficult almost how horrible the reentry process is.
Right.
Yeah, thank you for that, Rob. Because no, but yeah, I think what I mean, our relationship. I think Rob. It was interesting when I met Rob, and at that point in my life that I met Rob, I had been home almost 10 years at that point when I met Rob. So I had about 2 years left on parole. Um, and I remember meeting Rob, and I had never even heard of the U.S. Attorney's Office before. I was in the state system in PA. So when I met, so I met Rob. At first I was late for the meeting at first time. The second time when we rescheduled, I went down this windy hallway at the department at the U.S. Attorney's Office, and this windy hallway led to Rob's office, which was like this beautiful, Dr. Blue, beautiful corner office, whatever the deal is, and had whatever. And I sat there, I sat down, and it seems like in my head I sat down, and Rob started to tell me that he's the U.S. U.S. prosecutor, federal prosecutor, and I don't know how it jump cut. This is how it happens in my head. It was like, have a seat. It feels like he did this. Have a seat. He drops this envelope on this manila envelope with all like my past or something. I don't know. It's all in my head on the table, and it says, "So I'm a federal prosecutor. Some call us the feds." And I was like, at that point, my brain just like went left. I was like, okay. He said, yeah, we have about 150% conviction rate, and nobody even dares to like go to trial because we, whatever. All of that may be made up. However, it was real to me at the time. That's real. And I remember vividly not even hearing him after that. And it was like, womp 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 after he started talking. And I, for a second, all seriousness, for a second, I literally thought about being, I knew it was on the eighth floor, and I trying to look and see if that was a double pane window to jump out of the window. And that was a real, and let me tell you that I sat with that so much. It must have been apparent because Rob said, "Are you okay? You need some water?" And I was like, then he asked me, I said, "No, I'm fine." I started to come to. He says, "Would you like a beer?" And I'm just like, "No, I'm on parole." Like, is this a setup? This can't be real. Anyways, but then my relationship with Rob, literally at the time when I met him, it just was really clutch in my transition. From coming home, doing film, and being and working at the time at a community-based organization, the Village of Varsity Humanities. Which when I told Rob about Pull of Gravity as a concept that I had in my head back in when I first went to Greater Fort Prison, when I first went to prison, I'm seeing people. I know I didn't want to be there. It didn't take long for me to realize I didn't want to be there, right? Like it was just, and I'm seeing people that I talked to that was smart, seemed, obviously was smarter than me, had more life experience than me and everything. And they would go out and then in some cases come back the same day to the
Wow.
prison. They would go home and sometimes come back. And you hear the same stories, and these stories is about a parole officer did this, and in prison, because because of the nature of an institution like that, and part of the reason why it's as horrible of an experience and horrible as a instrument of care, is that it doesn't give you valuable access to understanding the reality outside of that space. So you had a very limited amount of information or points of entry of real time information from outside coming in. So I didn't know what to expect. So again, the whole time I'm trying to grab from anything, my whole time being in prison, trying to grab from anything to try to piece together a thought of creating a vision of what coming home would be. And I think that was really problematic because no matter what it wasn't tangible and built on anything real. So when I came home and got home and went through my rigmarole of that process, my thought was even at the time in prison, but my thought was when I go home, I want to create a film that depicts the reality in which people have to look forward to upon reentry. And that film was and that's the film I basically sat down with Rob and told him that it had been my ambition to do that for some time, and here's why. and here's the population is for people coming out of prison. And I did it in partnership with my partner John too.
Cool.
So that was that. Yeah, and that took us all over, and then Mobile, Alabama happened as a result of that. No, but no,
But we
we
did
we
get,
traveled
and
all around the country.
we got funding from the Department of Justice, and I think it was eye-opening for, it certainly was for me, but it was for many people. And, subsequent to that, there have been, many, they're called reentry simulations, which are now conducted all over the place. But as a matter of fact, the U.S.
Mm.
Attorney's Office in Philadelphia is doing a lot of work on that. They actually do these simulations. They go around and do them. And to give people an idea of just how onerous, how difficult and challenging doesn't even, begin to describe it, how incredibly difficult, almost impossible, all of the obligations that you have while you're on probation or parole, and then you've got to try to get a job, and you've got to be a parent or, a spouse or something. It's just, and for someone like me looking at it, and I think we've had judges do it and other people from government do it, and saying, oh my God, this system is just not workable. And so it's got to change. So we're working with, that's one of the things we're working on in terms of trying to create a doable, reasonable system, reentry system, so that when people come out, that they can get health care and they are supported and they do get assistance relating to housing and employment and education and various other things. We have within the Reentry Council, which we have hundreds of members, but we work with now 35 county reentry coalitions that actually work with people coming home, every day. And it's not perfect because this is an all volunteer force. There's not a line item in the state budget for reentry. So we're doing this in a way to try to help as many people as we can on fumes. And that's got to change.
Yeah.
If we really want to have an impact, we need funding. We need to recognize the impact of all of this and how we can change it, but we need some funding.
This is where it gets back down to politics and voting, right? Well, I
Well-
want to, yeah, go ahead.
Mhm.
Raul.
No, I was going to say again, I haven't taken part in the reentry simulation, and again, it's just, I definitely appreciate the effort and of putting that together. I just been a broken record again is still, and it's not fun to be a broken record all the time, but I think it's necessary, and I will continue. No part of that simulation has involved, like, it doesn't, no part creates any comprehension about the conditions in which that person just came from, that they're making decisions now that they're home. Like, and it's just, it really is an outsider perspective of the process, and that has to change. And I don't care about being a broken record that
And
way. It has to change.
aren't you
Has to
working on
change.
another movie?
I am.
Into Yeah.
About this. Yeah, no, for sure. But I mean, I'm saying it for sure, and thank you for bringing it up. But like I say, I think it always starts. This is what I'm talking about, the worldview and people applying something to their worldview. If people don't know about, and there's no acknowledgement, number one, about the psychological impact of incarceration. So we don't even talk about that. We just apply this thing now to what is it like for somebody coming home. So all of us just came from home, and we pick up a paper and says, hey, my name is Freddie, and I just came home and I'm going to pick up my kid. We just skipped over. Listen, let me tell you, I'm sitting here wondering, I told you, for like 6 months when I came home, I used to trip over the sidewalks.
Right.
Like, again, we talk about hippocampus atrophy and other things that constitute, like, brain reorganization. And it's like, how am I making sense of where I am right now? I remember talking to folks, like talking to them, and I can feel my mouth moving as if I'm watching myself talk.
That's
Like,
why I'm so glad
what?
I'm so glad you're making this film, because I think it is a way to in a unique way to reach a gazillion people to be living it, not just hearing about it, right? So it's not preaching to the choir. You're going to give people an experience that they haven't actually lived through, but they can at least experience it through the eyes of people who have. And that's incredibly, I think, incredibly valuable, because what you're describing is the profound dehumanization that occurs in the prison itself, not just what people have been through before, but what we then put them through when they're already vulnerable. So I
Yeah.
really
No, and
appreciate.
thank you for your help with that, and Rob as well. Like I think, and again, less even about just to say, just to clarify, less about the situation. Obviously, is dehumanizing, but I think the erasure of the actual experience is the dehumanization. It's
Exactly.
like now you've made people feel like I should just have it
Yeah.
together,
Yeah. I should be okay now. I'm
right?
out of
I
prison.
should be
Yeah.
fine. I'm
Right.
home, right? So
Right.
you're home. So get it together, and you should.
Right.
How?
Yeah.
So, and I
I'm
do,
21 years
Yeah.
home. Like, what are we talking about? When do I get it together again? Right?
Right.
Sorry, Rob. Go ahead.
no, I mean, we're really going at baby steps. I know myself, even recently, I've gone into 2 prisons in Pennsylvania, Chester, State Correctional Institution, Chester, and Frackville, and I have spoken with a number of, the men inside, and we have talked about trauma, and it's it's I think I've spoken to both of you about this, but the bottom line is I've actually asked the kind of, we'll call them expanded ACEs, where I, as an old white man standing in the middle of this circle, ask people if they've experienced any of these ACEs, that is an adverse childhood experience, when they were under 18 years old. And then to see this group of men, mostly of color, move closer and closer till they're almost up to my nose, it just speaks to how, the comments of the men after they go through it is, oh my God, I thought that this was just my experience, but now I see that it is a community experience. And then when they understand, and I think they begin to understand, that first of all, it took a lot of courage for them to even do that, and they've even said that, but that no one talks about that.
Mm-mm.
Their entire time. There was a guy who said just recently, 37 years in prison. No one ever talked about what happened to him.
Right.
But he said, but when they understand that what happened to them in those first years where they were abused or neglected or stuff happening in their homes or communities, they had no control over. This happened to them. And I certainly never realized it when I was a prosecutor. I don't think anybody understands it in the system. Just as Elle's saying, we don't appreciate what it's like to just go through those steps in the criminal justice system. That's why policing and courts and all of those steps have to be trauma informed. And of course, prisons are inherently non-trauma informed. They're the antithesis of it. So, and then reentry compounds it. So all of that has to be, we need to transform all of it. It can't be any one part of it, because if we do one part, but we don't do the other parts,
And Rob, speaking for you and me, we're going to have to pass it on to the next generation, because we ain't getting any
What?
younger.
Excuse
No,
me?
I don't. I'm not. You're not getting out that easy. That's all. You're not getting out that easy. You
I'm
talking about
gonna-
me and the work I'm doing. Y'all are at the core of that. I think that really quick. So again, I do believe, and again, I was speaking of, I was listening to Dr. Cummington and y'all talk earlier, and we're talking about, like stuff that's been proven that sits on hard drives, or certain things that have been proven that sits in publications. It's there, but it's not here,
Right.
right? And I and
That's
I,
right.
and I believe in the convening power of film. Like again, we've seen that with Polar Gravity,
Yep.
and again, Rob will attest. Me and Rob is in West Virginia, up in Hazleton, West Virginia, where you got folks. 85-90% of the population of that prison was from Philadelphia. You had a lady that was, that was from Willing, West Virginia, stood up and presented herself as that, and says, my name is Miss Such and Such. I'm the reentry coordinator. I'm from Willing. I went to high school in Willing. I went to University of Willing. And I'm telling people from Philadelphia that's going back to Philadelphia how to go home to Willing, right? Like from that perspective. And tearfully, right, Rob? Rob, I tell you, tearfully. This is after watching Pull of Gravity. Had we not, again, I made that with, John and some amazing folks that assisted in that process and created it with me. But had that not been, and with the support of Rob and him being a champion to get it paid for by and large, if that film had not been created, and from the work you use it in your classroom, what other in what other way can we convey that message about the reality in which people are coming home and going to prison too, or to and from? So it's the convening power we've seen that has just been it's tremendous, because you can have this ambition and be this like, oh, this and that, but unless you can convene folks around this topic, and we've seen this, that one of the biggest things about that film has been in the past, we would go to Minnesota, Minneapolis, whatever, St. Paul, and we would play the film, and in the audience, maybe 30 organizations that operate in that same area that never even talk to each other,
Right.
convening around the same. So for a long time, our host was organizations or government agencies or whatever the deal is that brought us just to convene those populations. So it's those to convene those interests to have these bigger conversations. So the convening power of film, I think, is amazing, and I feel like it's our evolution, just as a society and with technology and all these other things, that we are beginning to understand and comprehend more about trauma. The work y'all have done. I mean, I think the work you two have done around, I just give you all the credit in the world with respect to even bringing forth this conversation around trauma and informed, or just like comprehending trauma. And I think has just set a blaze to people can't not say that they've never heard that before now. Like, and I just feel like the time is right to put that into a sort of container that can be distributed across and convene people around the conversation.
The time is right, and we're going to stop on that note, because I totally agree with you. And thank you both for everything that you're doing. Thank you for spending time with us today. I really appreciate it. And hopefully more and more people will understand what it is that both of you and me are so passionate about, and particularly about the changes that need to happen. So thank you.
Thank you, Sandy. It's great.